In this lesson, we'll talk about creating UVs. So for our creature, to begin painting a texture map in Mudbox, we're going to want to have UVs. There is a way to paint textures without UVs called PTEX, but we want to create UVs. It's kind of the basic way that we can create our textures. It'll also allow us to kind of bake out normal maps that we can take a look at as we go through this process. So it's kind of the most common way. And basically a UV map is just an arrangement of the polygons and points here as sort of metadata that lets the program know how to apply a 2D texture around a 3D object. So there are a couple of basic ways that we can create UVs. Here in Mudbox, we can simply go to the lowest level down here, go up to UVs and maps, and let's go create UVs. So the current model already has UVs, the operation will replace them. So let's cancel out and let's take a look at what it's got currently. So to see the UVs, we'll go over to the UV tab, and you can see it doesn't really match up with the object that we have. We do have a few UVs here, but it's from the basic primitive shape that we use to create it, and it doesn't really match up. It's sort of incomplete. So we will replace those by going to UVs and maps, create UVs, and let's replace existing UVs. The number of UVs tiles to create, we're only going to create one tile. If you want to create multiple tiles, that's for if you want to kind of maximize the amount of pixels that you're using for your object. You can spread it over multiple UV tiles, but we're going to just use one, so we'll say OK to that. So this is going to go through and kind of flatten out this object into a UV layout. Now the UVs that Mudbox is going to create automatically are not going to be really human readable. The computer will have no problem interpreting them. You'll be able to paint textures just fine. But when you look at the UVs, you can see that they're all the faces are kind of broken out. And so everywhere you see a separation here, that's basically going to be a seam in our texture. Now, when we're painting in 3D, we're using those UVs and the computer's doing it all, so we won't see that seam, but it may not always be ideal. When you look at this texture, you're not really going to be able to edit it too much because, maybe part of the head's over here and then it corresponds to something that's way over here. So it's all going to be broken apart and it's not really going to make a lot of sense to you. So another way to create UVs may be some that are a little bit more custom, that you can kind of have a little more control over. You can do those in another application like, let's say, Maya. So same thing goes here. You can go to File and you can send this to any of these other applications, or you can export out an OBJ. So because we want to have something for you guys to look at, I've gone ahead and exported just an OBJ from Mudbox. So if you want to open that up and take a look at it, you can. I've gone ahead and loaded it up into Maya, and it'll be in your project files. And so this is the same low level here. There's no subdivision levels or anything, just that lowest level brought into Maya. So then you can see the UVs that you recognize here. Those are the existing UVs. And this is the space where we want to lay those UVs out. Okay, this space corresponds in Mudbox to this tile right here. So everything that we do, we want it to be inside of that square. So the first thing we'll do is go ahead and create UVs, and let's just do an auto map. So that's going to use different projections from basically kind of a cube shape to project down the different shells. And so you can start to see some of these things corresponding with some of the shapes. So for instance, if I were to grab this shape and I just grab the UVs here, so right click UVs and then control right click to shell to grab the entire shell, you can see it corresponds to the top of this. Now one thing that we want to do is anything that's sticking off, we want to cut, because of the way that we're trying to flatten this out. It's not going to work to have this all connected because it won't have anywhere to go. So I want to select, double click on both of these, and then I'm going to come over here and hit cut. And now if I select these UVs, control right click, I can move those off. Okay, so I don't necessarily want this to be a Maya, too much of a Maya course, but the basic idea is that you can come into your other application, whether it's Maya or whatever it might be, and you can edit the UVs. Now if you want to edit your own, go ahead and you can do that. Otherwise, you can use the mesh that I have if you want to, try to go back and start from there. But I'm just going to come in and I'll start from this basic sort of the top of the head, and then if I select those edges, it'll select the corresponding edges here, and I can go move and sew, and then I can select these edges, sew those together, and I can start to put all this data together. Okay, I can come in and start to cut off things like the feet, and then I just want to start to combine everything. Let's cut apart this foot as well, and then we can come in here and let's actually just light in like that. You can see where these start to connect together. Okay, now usually on a head like this, you'll kind of create a seam going down the back to give it some room. So I'll select that and hit cut. And then as we start to come in here, we can combine, or to bring some of that together. To relax this and sort of make it match up with our object in 3D space, we can select the UVs and we can hit this button, and that's called unfold. And so we can come in here, you can see it starts to break that apart, and then we can continue sewing these different bits together. Okay, so I'd sew a couple of times and then unfold it. I'd like to unfold different sections at different times. Again, sew that together and unfold. So you see how that makes a lot more sense visually than the UVs that Mudbox created. You can kind of get an idea that that's this object that we've peeled apart, instead of having all of those separate bits there. So just make sure to go through and find any of these little pieces, these little edges that need to be sewed together. Selecting one of them should select corresponding edge. Okay, here we've got the back, and so if we go ahead and cut that apart, then we can come in and start to attach it like that. If we need more room, we can kind of move this off to the side. Now, kind of have to do the same thing with the arms and the fingers. So you can see with the arms, they're sort of bent here. And so what I would do is I would actually probably cut the wrist Okay, and this would be over on the other hand there. So I'd cut that, and then I'd start to just make the arm one piece. And so you can see it's sending it over here. And then I make the hands and the fingers one piece as well. And we can come in and kind of unfold this. You can also grab points and sort of rotate them around. Okay, so that's another way to do it. If you want to just use the Mudbox way to do it, if you don't want to go into, because UVs can be kind of tedious and technical, and if you've never ever done UVs before, you're probably not going to learn them in this one lesson. So if you want to just get through the rest of the course without having to go through and create custom UVs, then by all means just use the create UVs in Mudbox, and that should work just fine for you. Okay, but the key is you want to do UVs somehow. So either create UVs in Mudbox or some sort of a custom layout in another application. And then all you have to do is bring that UV layout back into Mudbox. So here we would just come in, and with this object selected, we would just go to File, Import UV, and that'll import those UVs back in. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do that in the next lesson before we start with our color texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish these UVs. If you want to give it a try, go ahead. Otherwise, just make sure that you have some sort of a UV layout. If you want to go just create UVs, that'll work just fine. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started the next lesson, painting our color texture.